So, Picard has ended. Season 3 of Star Trek Picard is upon us, and this not only tells the end of this season, but this is the end of Picard's story. This is how his story ends. Does it deliver a satisfying ending? The answer is both yes and no. It's always going to be a bit of no because the ending to any story is always bittersweet, but the ending, especially of a story of such a beloved character and crew, you could say, I mean, the other crew members still have room to venture on into other projects, but this is being said as Picard's last story. This is the end of Picard. Now, certainly the ending was good enough. It wasn't as good as the ending of TNG by any stretch of the imagination, and there is wild callbacks to the end of TNG, Next Generation, to the end of Picard. It's literally actually the same scene they end with. However, it just doesn't have the same emotional impact as it did back then. Now, part of that could be because I was so much happier watching The Next Generation than I have been watching Picard, because Picard has, up until halfway through the end of its last season, been absolute dog shit. So, I'm glad that it didn't go out on like a season 2 wet fart. But it was satisfying enough. I think it was a good enough episode. There was too much emphasis put on other characters for this being the finale of Picard and the last entry in Picard's story. There was too much setting up of new characters for my liking. I feel like that could have been done in previous episodes, or maybe even the midway point of this episode. You could have done all yours and actually have finished strong on Picard. But we do this weird thing where we get an ending, but then it doesn't really end, and then it's led onto a end teaser scene with Jack and how Jack's story is going to progress, and Jack's basically taking up the mantle of Picard. Now, there's nothing wrong with Jack per se. I mean, other than he is responsible for murdering half of Starfleet, or getting half of Starfleet murdered by the other half, presumably causing the half that survive radical PTSD. I don't know if they remember when they were assimilated, but they murdered they murdered the older Starfleet, and they had to witness themselves doing it. Now, it's never revealed in the episode how much damage they actually did, and I think that was the point, right? But clearly, there were casualties, significant casualties. Anyway, I'm getting a bit muddled up about it. Essentially, I enjoyed the episode. It was good Star Trek in parts. There wasn't too much of the horrible Picard tropes that have been going on over the last few seasons. But ultimately, it wasn't the finale that I was hoping for, and it wasn't the emotional punch that I had from TNG finishing all those many moons ago. So, let's break down the episode slightly. The Enterprise D is back from the last episode. Now, I was hoping that when I was seeing it in this episode, I was going to feel something more, feel like I did at the end of the last episode, but I just didn't. Now, I don't know if it was because the music was different or something else. Something just felt off. I just didn't feel the same way I did as the previous episode did. Certainly, there was a big swell of emotion that came with the last episode and nostalgia, and when this episode came in around The Last Generation, maybe I was I've watched it, so to be fair, I've watched the end of episode 9 so many times in between then and now, so maybe it's just fatigue. But I just didn't feel the same when I saw the D come back up. So yeah, that was a little disappointing, but I think that was my expectations, of it, rather than the show doing anything wrong. It still looked amazing. I still loved seeing it. I just didn't have that same feeling. Then we just rushed into a battle, basically, or we just rushed to the problem straight away. We find the problem. Picard says they're looking at the whole of Jupiter at one point, because they go to the Sol system, our solar system, and they find a Borg cube in Jupiter, and they have this huge picture of Jupiter, and Picard just goes, enhance, and then it instantly zooms straight onto the Borg cube. He's like, he doesn't tell them where to enhance, he just says enhance, and they've because they couldn't see it, but it was in this eye of the storm, this massive Borg cube. So I'm like, okay, right. So then they fly down to the Borg cube, and to give scale, size, it's massive. It's much bigger than any Borg cube we've ever seen before, by the looks of it. But no explanation as to what it really is, and how it works, and how it got there, how nobody has noticed it. They do some sort of hand waving that they opened up a trans-warp conduit inside Jupiter. It's like nothing's explained in the episode other than because they don't really care. The principle is that they don't really care about the story that's going on. What they're getting to is the end of Picard. So they don't really care about the story they've laid out, if I'm being honest. They just beam into the cube, and there's lots of goodbyes at that point. I'm thinking, no one's going to die here. Like, Picard, if anyone's going to die, it'll be Picard. But even I don't think that. They're not going to do that. They're going to do that to Picard, to be his story being that he just dies. Again. So, I was thinking, there's not really tension in here. Anyway, they beam down, and the Borg cube is basically deserted for reasons. It's not fully explained. I believe this is the Borg Queen that was introduced in First Contact. And somehow, I can't even really remember the end of that film, but I thought that the Borg Queen was killed, and there was a few Borg sort of left on Earth. But it seems to be that Picard had somehow killed all the Borg, and then left her little Borg collective adrift somewhere. So she's been cannibalizing all the other Borg that are on the ship to stay alive. Somehow, for some reason, I don't understand why she couldn't just call the other cubes, call the Borg whole to come and get her, to save her. Again, it's not really explained, and it's like, don't worry about it. That's not the point. That's not the point of the episode. So don't worry about that. Just enjoy it. I'm like, okay. If this was going on for another few episodes, I'd probably be like, well, what is actually going on? But because I knew it was the end, I'm like, okay, I don't even really care about this story anymore. The story's kind of crap. So let's just get it done. Let's just tick the box so we can see how it ends for them. So they beam down again. It's Picard. You do get a funny line. This is where the show is good, but this is nothing. I don't think it's anything to do with the writing per se. I don't think they can take credit for this, but they're deciding who's going to go down. So Picard's like, I'm going down. Riker's like, obviously I'm going down. And then Worf goes, well, I will make it a threesome. And Riker's just like, do you even hear yourself? So that banter is like hilarious, which I think has come from it's evolved from them no longer being an official crew and no longer in hierarchy. Because I don't think Riker would have really ever said that to Worf if they were in, like, he was his commander. He always did keep quite professional. But yeah, I thought that was funny. I thought that was interesting. It was fun. So they go down, they beam on the Borg cube, and there's some exposition nonsense around, like, we have to sever Jack from the transmitter, even though he is the transmitter. And then there's a sphere which is somehow powering the transmitter, so somehow powering Jack. So if you destroy one of those things, like sever his connection or destroy the transmitter, that would surely do it. So you don't really have to do both. So I don't understand why they don't all just go for Jack. I suppose, yeah, no, fair enough. No, that would be stupid. I'd probably criticize them if they all went for Jack. So yeah, they split up so that if one of them has success at least. And nobody acknowledges at any point that Jack has murdered quite a lot of people, because not only did all the Borg collective people murder everyone on the ships who wasn't collective, like Borg, they destroyed the space station, which was massive, and that must have held thousands of people, thousands and thousands of lives, and it gets destroyed, and they're all dead, and that blood is on Jack's hands. But this, it has been utterly hand waved away. There might be ramifications if we go into a new series of the Star Trek Legacy or whatever it's called, that they tease at the end of this episode. There must be ramifications. There must be things, or people must mention it at least, being like, "Oh my god, because they mentioned about Locutus of Borg 35 years later, and he didn't do it willingly. Jack went willingly to the Borg Queen, and then they all died. So he was much more to blame than Locutus, like Jean-Luc was when he became a Borg. So if I do watch it, which is 50-50, and they don't, address that as a major plot point, or like a major character development that he has to come back. Because I was getting on at him when he was murdering the security guards, like when he was punching them out cold and they were slamming their heads on the ground and killing them. Like, that was back when it was just one or two, but he's murdered half of Starfleet by this point, and like quite a lot of the Federation, and they only narrowly avoid him just being responsible for destroying the entirety of the Earth. So we digress. But so at no point nobody says, well, they did say his connection has to be severed at any cost. Wink, wink. If we have to, we'll kill him. We'll chop his head off. Murderize him big time. But, it's Star Trek. We know it's not going to come to that. That's the whole point of Star Trek. There's always a better solution. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't need to go into too much of the plot. I don't need to break down the plot for you guys. You go and see it. My thoughts on it were that it was just a very convenient end to a story. The Borg seemed to be no actual threat. It was super convenient. There was a gizmo that they could shoot, and that just ends the plot. And that's it. They shoot the gizmo, they rescue Jack, and it's just, that's it, done. It's clean. The Borg are presumably no more now, right? Like, the Borg are gone. The Queen's gone. You've got the Gerarity Borg who are sort of floating around being nice to people. But the Borg themselves are gone? That's them just done? It's like, okay. But, yeah, the story was just a mechanism for getting us to the end point, which is the real crux of the story. And there was some bits of it I liked at the ending piece. The episode split in two, right? You've got the story with the Borg, which gets wrapped up, and then there's the end of Picard, right? Now, the story with the Borg is just an exercise in convenience, right? So there's no real substance to it. So you'll forget about that story very quickly. But the ending story, it does some things where it's trying to tug at your emotional heartstrings, but it just fails. And then sometimes some bits it gets it quite right. So there's Tuvok actually comes back. So the changeling thing is kind of addressed, whereby, they're still out there, the changelings, but they've got the new technology to scan for these particular changelings. So they're rounding them up. And they've done some magic with the transporter to basically fix everything. So everything's just back to normal. There's no ramifications whatsoever to what's happened. Everything is reset back to the very start of Picard. So the whole thing is now just null and void, right? Which is fine, right? Fine, I get it. You don't want to have to deal with any headaches or any hang-ups, any hangovers when you go into your new series about what's happened. You want that just gone. Okay, it's gone. The whole show is now gone. It's pointless. So we get what was supposed to be an emotional, emotional moment where Tuvok is back. And to be fair, I love Tuvok. So having Tuvok come back as actual Tuvok this time, not changeling, was great. Him chatting to Seven, and then she's like, "Oh, I quit Starfleet because, reasons. I don't follow the rules. I'm a renegade." So she's like, "Okay, but look at what Captain Shaw said about you." So she plays this message to Captain Shaw is like, "You're the best. She's the best. She'll definitely be. I'm recommending she be captain." Right? I don't buy that at all. So there's no emotion there because he was a dick to her. He hated her because she was Borg. Right? And it was only near the end, where he, changed his mind about her. So that's bullshit. I'm calling that out as bullshit. Then, so that was just nonsense, I thought. The next thing is you get the crew. Well, they've changed the name of the Titan. The Titan is no longer the Titan. The Titan's now the Enterprise G. You're like, oh my god, what's in a name? It's like Zero Timer, what's in a name? Is it Jack's going out? Well, nepotism goes a long way. Picard's like, no, it's all you, son. He's like, and the whole audience and everyone in Starfleet knows, no. It's because your mother is Admiral Crusher and your father is goddamn Jean-Luc Picard. Admiral Jean-Luc Picard. That's why you were fast-tracked through, Starfleet Academy. Nothing to do with your skills. Or you mind-melded people. You mind-jiggered people to get you up ahead. But yeah, 100%. 100% it was due to your name. You should have been held back due to the fact that you had murdered half of Starfleet. Yeah? So, anyway, they've renamed the Titan to the Enterprise G. You're like, that means nothing. I felt nothing about that. There has been so many Enterprises, and I believe there is currently an Enterprise F. The Titan I didn't like as a ship anyway. I'd have been much more excited had they just retrofitted the D. Instead, they've mothballed the D into the Fleet Museum. I'd have been much more excited had they brought back the Enterprise D and put these people on that ship. That would have been something interesting. But no, we're just getting a new crew of the most unlikable characters. Raffi, Jack at times. Jack is like a roller coaster. He fades up and down in likability. And 7 of 9. 7 of 9 is likable. I don't like Geordie's daughter. I can't even remember her name. And the rest of them, not a chance. I couldn't pick them out of a lineup. So there's no the bridge of this new Titan or new Enterprise G is seriously lacking some charisma. There is no charisma in any of these crew. So that does not bode well for a series based around them. And I swear to God, I cannot watch another series that has Raffi in it. They're gonna have. I mean, I know season 2 and season 3 of this were filmed together, there's no way they could have known about like the fan backlash for Raffi, and I don't think I'm alone in this, thinking that she's very unlikable. I think this is quite a widely held opinion, so I believe she's going to get the boot. If they do another series, I think she'll get the boot, or her role will be significantly reduced. Because, well, currently she's sitting as number 1, like, against Captain 7. So I don't know how they're going to do that, but they really have to. But I'm not, say there's zero charisma in the whole crew and ship, so I'm not interested in a crew like that anyway. But you get to the only emotional bit of this episode, really, for me personally, is when they're in Guinan's bar and they decide to play poker. Now that, to me, is just the callback to the end of TNG, where they're playing poker in one of their rooms. And it's when Picard kind of first realizes that he really should have spent more time with them as people rather than just a crew. And it ends on like the now immortal lines for me of nothing wilds and the sky's the limit, you know. So they're playing poker, and it's pitched like I think they're even in the same seats, but you see them playing poker, and it's like, this is great. That got me. And they're laughing and they're playing, and it's like, yeah, they've won. They all made it through. They're all better because of it. Picard has a son. He has a family now, the thing that he was always missing. Nothing's ever said about his Romulan girlfriend who lives on his his vineyard. So don't know what's going on there. But they're happy. They're all happy, and they're all, you know, flourishing. I was like, yeah, that's great. That's great. End there. But no, it doesn't. It keeps going. And this is when you get the very, very end scene, which just proves that they're going to be doing another series, not of Picard, but of this legacy crew. Jack is visited by Q. Like, Q had a fantastic... The only good thing about Series 2 of Picard was Q and his journey to dying. And you think, yeah, okay, Q's dead. And he even addresses us like, oh, I thought you died. He's like, ha, you think so linear. He's a time traveler thing, right? So he kind of, even though he is dead, you know, an earlier version of him could go forward and jump back, and he is, by all definitions, a god. Yeah, he is omnipotent and omnipresent. He is essentially God. This Q collective, they are gods. So yeah, there's no rules for them. But I didn't like it, and I'm not interested. I really wish they hadn't used the end of Picard's story to sequel bait another shitty Star Trek series. Because we've had too many of them recently. You should have just left it as this is the end of Picard. Don't need to shoehorn in a teaser trailer for another series that ultimately you've not earned to be watching, because the only thing that kept me watching this was Picard. And in the later episodes, obviously, the rest of the old crew. But Picard was the only thing that kept me going from Series 1 to Series 2 and then into Series 3. That was the only thing, the only hook. So to do him dirty like that, to not even allow his last episode to just be about him and the Enterprise crew, was like, fuck you. So that just annoyed me. I left the episode annoyed when I should have left the episode. I would have preferred to left the episode sad that it had ended. That would have been the ultimate. If I had left the episode sad that it had ended. If I'd been happy that it ended, that's not a good sign. If you're happy something has ended, yeah. You can be happy that the story was good, but you should kind of be sad that it's ended if you really enjoyed it. And you definitely shouldn't be disappointed. So it was a bit of a weak ending, really, for Picard, I think. So maybe I'm wrong. You know, this is nostalgia is great for people who lived through it, right? So, like, nostalgia for me is the TNG. Now, if they brought back some of the original cast, I wasn't connected to them at all. So there's probably people who are, in their 60s right now, or 60s, 70s, who watched the original series when it came out, thinking, well, I'm not connected to these TNG characters, so they're like the new ones to me. I want my characters, so this means nothing to me. And there'll be people who are obviously didn't watch TNG when it came out, who are like, yeah, I don't care about these old farts. Like, who the fuck are they? I want to see this new series. I want to see this new thing is intriguing me. It's interesting me, and I'm glad if there is that, because I loved Star Trek so much when I was growing up that I want more people to enjoy it. And they don't have to enjoy my Star Trek, they can enjoy their own Star Trek. And in 30 years' time, when we see Jack and LaForge's daughter in their own reunion tour, and I'll be sitting there as a really old man going, God, I hate these people still. Where's Picard? I mean, they're long dead. But, yeah, so if this is going to bring in a new audience of Star Trek fans, then great. I hope they get the same quality that I got, which at the moment they're not. So I'm hopeful but nervous for new Star Trek fans, because seriously, the writing and the storytelling is just not up to the same par as when I was younger. And a lot of that goes down to how much choice there is now in streaming services and the streaming services themselves, whereby there's a lot of less restrictions, and sometimes restrictions actually make the show better. If you're having to work in a tight constraint, you're often forced to be more efficient and be better. So you're forced to do more storytelling rather than just relying on visual explosions. Which, by the way, I didn't even touch on this. This has had that in droves. Random, huge visual explosions, phasers, torpedoes firing everywhere, every direction. No chance of figuring out who's doing what in some scenes. And plot armor is the strongest armor of all, of course, stronger than diamonds. And the Titan was covered in plot armor this week. But again, I'm gonna so forget about the first half of the story episode that it doesn't bother me. So I've ranted on there, rambled on for a little while, but I hope that it does. I hope this leads to something better. I hope this leads to something more. I'm just not convinced it will. But if you agree with me, if you don't, let me know in the comments. And if you want to, you can go ahead and subscribe. But if you don't, then fair enough. But until next time, live long and prosper. I know that was an older one, not even in my generation, but it still works.